Welcome, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of What's the Buzz with Giselle Fishing and Lucy Parker. Today, we are going to be talking about adapting to different generations in the workforce. This is a very important topic. We are starting to hear more employers and more individuals talk about it. And we're going to go through why it's important to understand and to adapt, embrace, and change what we do in order to create a healthier culture, as well as to be able to adapt to our different customers, be it a patient, a member, and whatever you define as being a customer. So why is this important? We're going through a great resignation as well, right? The great resignation, where we see a lot of individuals moving from their workforce to another employer. We see a lot of help wanted signs. So we need to understand how to adapt to and understand these different generations. Lucy reminded me today, as we're talking, we don't want to create a label. However, there is a label that's defined out there by different segments, right? So let's talk to what those are. And here's a fun fact. Today I'm getting comfortable with the uncomfortable with technology, right? So if you think about my generation, we weren't born, and I'm in the generation X. I wasn't born to technology. And so I'm learning as we go through this, how to look at technology as a critical item in what we do. All right, so let's go through the different generations. First is what's defined as traditionalist, 1922 through 1945. What we know of this generation is these individuals, and again, not everyone is the same. So you might look at these and say, well, I can really say that I have some of these characteristics, and others can say, you know, this doesn't apply to me. But these are general. So when we think about a traditionalist, what they bring to the table, they're very loyal. Most of these individuals have worked for one employer all their life. Obviously, technology wasn't something that they were born with or used, right? They're known to be very loyal, incredible team players, and like I said, stay with one employer. Baby boomers, right? Lucy, this applies to you, right?
Amen.
Born between 1946 to 1964. Traditionally, again, they stay at an employer for a long time, but they're willing to move. They've moved in their career, and they started to climb the corporate ladder a little slower to learn technology, right? But, you know, my mother is in this space too, and I can tell you she's on Facebook and Instagram, and she loves technology, but she's slow to adapt. We have to teach her those things. Next is Gen X, which is where I fall into this category, as I mentioned, 1965 to 1976. We like to have structure. We're also very loyal, but we also enjoy work-life balance. We want to have a little bit of both. And we started to assimilate to technology. Again, we weren't born with technology. We learned how to assimilate to technology. And then millennials, which, by the way, is the largest workforce that we have today. So this is really important to understand. And these are individuals that also get labeled all the time. There's a stigma around millennials. So we got to help and, you know, change that. Millennials are integral to technology. Not that they were born to it, because Facebook and all these things happened maybe a little bit later, but you know, they have been able to really embrace technology very well. And they believe that work-life balance is a must. And you know, when we talk about, you know, work from home and hybrid and things like that, and I know Lucy's going to get into that a little bit, you know, they tend to like to work from home a little bit more. And then the last one here, which is, again, these are individuals that are starting to come out of high school, They're starting to be consumers. They're starting to be, at the workforce is the Gen Z. And this is the first generation really born into technology. And I can just quickly tell you, my daughter, I have a little one that she's turning 8 in November. She was born with an iPhone and an iPad in her hands, and that's what she knows. She prefers to have an iPad in her hand versus watching a TV. So these are just some of the things. And so we need to adapt. So I want to turn it over to Lucy. I want to get your thoughts, Lucy, on how does a single set of approach work for all, right? So let's think about the workforce and an employer. Does an employer have a cookie cutter approach, or what are some of the things that an employer should do?
Hey, hi everybody. I am more than glad to talk about a little bit of history here in terms of a one size fits all, which does not, as everyone should know, because we're all different. So, just going back to these segments and understanding your audience. I grew up in marketing in my career, so audience has always been important to me to understand who I'm talking to, what do they like, what has been their history, right? So, when we think about history and how these segments have come to be, it's very important to understand what's going to motivate them. So Gen Z, born with, I can't believe that, Giselle, but your daughter was born with an phone in her hand, an iPhone in her hand. So when you think about Gen Z and what's going to entice them, they want cutting edge technology. That's what's going to motivate them. Interestingly enough, they prefer salary over benefits. And I think that's because, as you and I know in healthcare, younger people believe that they're invincible when it comes to healthcare. They will go out and they may or may not have healthcare insurance, but when it comes to this group, they're going to look for opportunities and training as it relates to, again, going back to cutting edge technology. They want tuition reimbursement because of the, school tuition, and there's concern around that. They want competitive salaries. They want work flexibility. So when it comes to training, they're going to look more for, what's going to entice me to stay here longer? Is this going to be a company that I want to stay with because they're offering me what what I can do and what my needs are? Cutting edge technology may be a work project for someone versus, training. So there are all kinds of ways that looking at, Gen Z, 25 or younger, and how they might relate to the job that they have, the career that they have, and what they want to do. So I'm a baby boomer. So, I rank up there with, the largest aging population, and people who are not just staying in the workforce, but they're equally leaving and retiring. So baby boomers, and I'm very comfortable with talking with my peers, and I can finish their sentences, and, we know where we came from. So I don't mean that I don't mean for that to come across as pompous. It's more about, when you have a relationship with someone and you're talking with them, it's like, yeah, I get that. I know what you're talking about. And so, again, baby boomers just want to be thanked. Okay. In terms of the job they do, they really don't like a lot of oversight, and neither do Gen Xers. They feel that they have been in the workforce. They have, gone to school. They feel that they've got established families. They appreciate the autonomy that they have. So how do you train someone like that? And most of them may be in management positions now. So, when you think about who people are and what age group they're in and where they are in their lifestyle and in their work careers, there are different things that are going to motivate them. Millennials, the largest workforce, as you mentioned. Millennials are very interested in healthcare. They have young families. They're very interested in benefits that they can use with those young families and in their career. And training them will be more of a broader approach with, yes, technology, but other, topics that are strategic, maybe part of the, maybe technology, but maybe more strategic in terms of how to, let's talk about finance or actuarial or, any profession. But basically take a profession and think in terms of they want to add value. And the way they want to add value is probably with technology. So, where can we look at process? How can we build that with technology? How can we make this more efficient? And then you get to Gen Zs, of course. And, in terms of efficiency, one day I had someone who texted me and I was right across the hall from them when I was in the office. And I went over to their cube and, wanted to talk face to face. And that was interesting because, it's a younger person. They look at it as being much more efficient. I'm looking at the connection and the dialogue or the conversation with this person. So I think what I've learned in my, dealings with all types of age group is that you cannot label people. And to your point, I think that everyone brings something to the workplace as it relates to teach me, because I'm not the expert here. What do you think about this project? How would you tackle it? In terms of training and development, many larger organizations have lots of training and development opportunities. For younger people, it may be more around networking, and social interaction is a little tricky because they may want to do it online with social media. They may want to do it, through text. So everyone's style is different. And I think that from a communication standpoint, just understanding, not so much what segment you are, but, kind of understand their levels of technology, their, just their education, their interest, and that kind of thing. You can very quickly assess, how do I relate to this person? What can I do to bridge the gap here if there's, a gap as it relates to my interest, their interest, and ultimately we're on a work team together and we need to come together. So that part is more of, if you're in a round table, even if it's a virtual round table, you want to make sure that, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And once you get through the table, the round table, you will find that people articulate and use different words or phrases like LMAO or LOL or, gosh golly, I don't know. But you will find that people articulate things differently, and you can tell pretty much, where they're coming from, what their interests are, and what motivates them. And it's the motivation piece that will help engage them. So, you have a stat on that, Giselle. Maybe you want to talk to that.
Yeah, Lucy, and before I give that stat, I would say that, you and I are probably a really good example of, bringing two different generations. And there's, behind the scenes, I've also, talked to millennials around technology and how to make this podcast better. So we're a great example of how you can bring individuals together instead of labeling them, saying, how do we bring what we bring to the table, each one of us, and how do we bring it together to be better, right? So I think that's really important. And, Lucy, I would say that, some of the things that when you look at all these different generations, the one thing that comes to mind that we're all pretty similar is that we all want to work hard. We have strong ethics and we all are problem solvers. That across every generation is very similar. So again, I think that's why it's important to embrace this, bring it together. And then when we talk about, stats, we are, like I talked about, in the Great Resignation, where we're seeing so many individuals, so many employers looking for employees, as I mentioned. The number that I saw out there the other day was that there's 52% disengagement today that causes poor productivity and employee turnover. So we got to change that. And when we talk about inclusivity, there's a lot of different things that come to mind, right? Culture. When I talk about that in this episode, it's around multi-generations. And I want to make sure that how do we create a more inclusive workforce, identifying multi-generations? And so there's a few tips. First of all, I would say, let's meet everyone where they are. That's important. All right. So let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge that we're all different, right? Make it a priority. Just so have the conversation, be aware of the communication differences, and then, look at your employer and say, what are the things, and maybe speak up, right? And we see that a lot with the millennials. They want to make a difference. They want to be heard. And so we need to start to think about how employers maybe start to create bonus programs or to incentivize productivity and longevity with the company if we want to keep people for a long time. So Lucy, I'm not sure, did you have anything you wanted also to include in that topic?
Well, I think, the past couple of years with the pandemic has brought us together in a very different way, virtually, in group meetings. It's been challenging, sometimes almost demoralizing, maybe not be the right word, but the social aspect of being in the office versus being virtual has been a big point of discussion. And I think for most of us, we have had to scurry to get online and figure out the virtual meeting part as it relates to not just the format, because it could be, it could be Zoom or some other format, but trying to understand what is the best use of these meetings as it relates to making sure people are engaged, making sure they're coming, and what role do they play. So being virtual, you can't always read people's nonverbal cues. When they're sitting in a room, you can read it, whether from a sales perspective or operations, you can tell whether people are being receptive, whether they're paying attention. So I think all those challenges really make us question, like, how engaged are employees? And, is this the topic that's going to resonate with them? So the whole virtual meeting structure and where we've come from, I think we've done a great job just generally for businesses. And, again, everyone had to scurry. We did it. There were some debacles or mistakes, I'll say, as it related to, oh, I thought I recorded that. Oh, no, you didn't. Okay. But, that being said, I think that we're in a new era and we have learned a lot from each other during this pandemic as it relates to the struggles, people who are not professionals in the office have to go out and travel and have lost their jobs, retail, there's just a whole host of issues, which I know we don't have time to go over those and talk about them individually. But, just in general sense, coming back and starting to understand this, this fatigue, if you will, is very important. And what we can do as leaders is to, at the very least, meet people in the middle, understand where they're coming from, and be highly respectful, and engage them. And sometimes the virtual meeting may spend the first 20 minutes just on how are you versus let's get right to the numbers. And you have to be authentic, right? Even virtually, you have to be authentic. You cannot just jump into a meeting unless it's like a fire drill. And this is urgent because there are fire drills that businesses take care of all the time. But there has to be a way to really just listen to employees. There are a lot of, employee surveys out there that are used, and really understand, the breadth and depth of those conversations, that maybe it's one-on-one with your manager, maybe it's a peer group, maybe it's up and down these segments, but generational, as you say, bring a, have a generational commission, if you will, of how to adapt and use not just technology, but how do we communicate with each other and what are some of the basics. It sounds almost governmental, but honestly, it's we're at a time where this is very important to us as, being in a capitalist society and being able to survive all of the issues that are out there. And I'm just going to stop there.
Lucy, thank you so much. Yeah, we've gone a little bit over time today, but this is such an important topic. We could probably spend a good hour or maybe even a half a day on this topic. But I like to close it out by saying, there's a few things that we all have to consider when looking at multi-generational, thinking, which is we need to embrace it. We need to meet with people where we are. We need to be respectful. We need to be curious, right? Instead of labeling everyone, be curious. Let's ask the questions, sit at the table. And at the end of the day, we as leaders have to create a structure regardless of generational differences. So thank you for joining today. A little teaser for our next one. It's going to be even better. We're going to be talking about working from home, hybrid, or back to the office. What are the pros and cons? There's a lot of questions around this, a lot of debate. Love to hear your feedback. If you want, send us some comments around it before we get started. But we're going to be diving into that the next session. So I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye now.